Welcome back to another episode of Erotically Empowered, where we discuss all things pleasure, intimacy, feminine power, and unapologetic confidence. I am, of course, your host, Gomulka. Okay, so last week I want to tell you a little bit about something that was going on for me that is going to help you on your journey to awaken more pleasure for yourself. So last week I was having a pretty rough week, pretty emotional week. A few things were going on in my life and I felt like I was in a real weird space. I was very, very emotional. I felt disconnected from my heart and my body, and I was just all over the shop. And that's totally okay, by the way. You know, we can't have the ups without the downs. This is all part of growth, all part of life. There is no right or wrong. There's just different experiences. But I was struggling. I was having a rough time. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to go into a self-pleasure practice because self-pleasure in the way that I teach it, which is very different to masturbation. Masturbation is goal-orientated. Self-pleasure is the art, the practice of being with whatever arises in the body. This is about being with whatever's there, meeting you where you're at, allowing that energy to move, and, then you're free to connect to your body, your pleasure, throughout your whole life. So I decided I'm going to go into a self-pleasure practice because I know how powerful this work is, the somatic work for transmuting this energy and coming back to me. So I went into a self-pleasure practice. But here's what I did. I tried to bring pleasure. I tried to make myself feel pleasure. I tried to give myself this beautiful, divine, orgasmic ecstasy that heals me, that releases me. I went into it with a goal focus, which is not self-pleasure. Okay, mind you, this is not self-pleasure at all. This goes against everything that I teach and the work that I do. However, that's the state I was in. I was in this state of, I just want to feel pleasure. I just because I know that the pleasure that I feel in the self-pleasure is very different to a 2-minute quickie with a toy. That pleasure, is expanding and healing and releasing. So in my head, I was like, I'm going to go in and just have this, amazing self-pleasure time. Do you think I could feel pleasure? Do you think I could feel any kind of bliss whatsoever? No, not in the slightest. And I couldn't even stay in the self-pleasure practice. I got so irritable and in my body and had to stop. Now, 2 things were going on here. Number 1 is that I went into it with a goal. Again, let me reiterate, that is not self-pleasure. There is nothing wrong with going into something saying, I want an orgasm, I'm going to have an orgasm. If that's what you want, and that's that's masturbation, right? But again, that is very different to self-pleasure. Self-pleasure is no goal, no expectation. You are being with whatever arises. And that is how I went from, and my clients, how I went from numb, unable to feel my orgasm, low libido, all of that, to awakening the most incredible state of orgasmic bliss within me and, connecting to my erotic fire, was learning to actually, for once in my life, be with my body with whatever arose and stop running. That is what self-pleasure is. That is what I teach women. That is what I teach you here on this podcast. And this is what is going to enable you to awaken your body. So 2 very different purposes. But that was number 1 that went wrong, if we're going to label this, okay? That I went into it with a goal. Number 2, I was not ready for pleasure, not in the slightest. I was not in the pleasure-ready state. I was struggling with my emotions. I was very unregulated in my body. I was very in my head. My heart was closed. My body was tense. That is not the pleasure ready state. And here's the thing. If you try to force yourself to feel pleasure when you are not in the pleasure ready state, you are not going to feel pleasure, or you're going to end up needing to turn to, things like adrenaline-based pleasure, things like intense friction, intensity, some kind of visual stimulant, whatever, because your body is not ready and open. What is the pleasure-ready state? Exactly what I just said. Your body is open. Your body is relaxed. You're out of your mind. You are grounded. You are present. And you feel safe and free to let go. It is only when you are in that state that you are going to awaken and connect to your deepest pleasure. If you, and I look back at my old self, and even myself from last week, okay, look back at my old self, how I wanted to try to feel pleasure so badly. There was no part of me that was in any pleasure-ready state. I lived in my head 24/7. My heart was closed. My body was tense and tight. And sometimes, so I was with, way back then, I was with a safe, loving man. So obviously I'm not, saying that I did this with anyone that wasn't a safe, loving man. But there were times where I tried to force myself to be intimate because I did love that man and he was a great man, and I felt bad because I was always, avoiding sex and intimacy, and we went long periods without it because I struggled so badly. So then, at other times I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because he deserves this and he is a good man. And he's so patient, and I'm going to do this because I do want to. And look, deep down, I wanted to be a partner who, was enjoying intimacy with my partner. I wanted to be that woman who was having the incredible sex and intimacy. It's not that I didn't want that. Deep down, that's what I wanted. But I was so disconnected from me that I couldn't be that person, right? So I really, really wanted to, have sex and be intimate. So there were times where I would will myself into doing it, and we would do it. And, I would say afterwards that, if you were to ask me then, I would say, yes, I felt, some pleasure, and I'm glad that I did it. And I was glad that I did it. And again, I am not telling you ever to force yourself. If you understand what this whole episode is about, if you keep listening, you'll understand that I'm saying do not go against, what your body's saying and what I stand for. But I did feel better, quote unquote, feel better afterwards, because it was like I ticked that box, and, I was a good partner in those moments. But the level of pleasure that I could feel was certainly nothing like I had ever, what I experience now and what I now know pleasure, like the deepest, profound intimacy and orgasmic bliss to be. It, of course, wasn't. And of course, the only way during those moments of intimacy that I could feel pleasure was through adrenaline-based activities, forcing the pleasure through high-powered toys, because I was never in any kind of pleasure-ready state. I didn't know, none of this, I wouldn't know what any of this meant back then. But of course, if I was never open and ready and in that receiving mode to receive pleasure at the highest level, how in the world could I feel the kind of pleasure that I wanted to feel? And last week, how in the world can I expect myself to experience the kind of pleasure and mind-blowing, orgasmic release that I know, I can feel and that I feel, all the time? How could I expect myself to feel that when I wasn't ready to receive? The pleasure-ready state means you are exactly what it says. You are ready. You are primed. You are, I can't think of another word here, but you are primed for pleasure. That is the state that you want to be in to access your greatest orgasmic bliss. And you cannot be in that state. You cannot receive and access your highest pleasure, your greatest pleasure, your pleasure that does not come with force, your pleasure that comes with just, incredible flow and ecstasy. You cannot access that if you are not open and fully ready to receive pleasure. If you are in the survival mode, which, I call there's the pleasure ready state or survival mode. Survival mode where, your body is tense, you're living in your head, your heart is closed, you're just on the edge, or your emotions, like me last week, are very, unregulated. You're just all over the shop. If you try and access pleasure then, you're not going to feel the pleasure, the depth of pleasure that I talk about and teach. You are not going to feel that. You are absolutely not, because you cannot force your way into your deepest pleasure. Your deepest pleasure does not come from force. It comes from complete and utter surrender and letting go, presence, connection, vulnerability, intimacy. It comes from being open and ready for pleasure. What you've got to remember is that pleasure at its deepest level is far more than just a physical action. It is far more than just a flicking of the bean. It takes that openness, that vulnerability, that full presence with whatever arises, that being okay with whatever arises. Orgasm, remember, is a build-up and a release of energy in your body. So if this energy in your body, it's all the same energy. There's only one energy field in your body. If this energy in your body is feeling really uncomfortable, painful, anxious, like you're feeling anxious, it's, your heart's fluttering, your stomach's churning, you're just tense, you're whatever, how can you expect that energy to be pleasurable? How can you expect yourself to feel that energy in a pleasurable way when that energy you're currently running from, because it's uncomfortable, it feels, it feels painful? How can you expect that? It's not going to happen. You need to be in the pleasure ready state. Your number one goal, if you are going into intimacy with yourself or with your partner, your number one goal should first and foremost be to release the goal. Your goal should never be anything other than being present. Because if your goal is that, okay, I'm going to have great sex, I'm going to orgasm, all of this, then you are taking yourself away from full presence and you're going to struggle to get there. Your goal should be complete presence. And your goal should be to shift yourself. If you know that you're wanting to go into pleasure, you're wanting to go into intimacy, and you know that, it's been a really, really tough day and you're feeling really anxious and, just really tense and you're stuck in your head, going into pleasure from that state, going into intimacy in that state will not bring you great pleasure. your first step should be to shift yourself from survival mode into pleasure state. Regulating your nervous system, connecting to your heart, being fully present, dropping out of your mind and into your body. That is where your focus needs to be before you even go into any intimacy with your partner. Otherwise you're going to end up not just not having a pleasurable time, but you're possibly going to resent your partner, because if you're going into intimacy with them and you're tense and you're stuck in your head, you're going to be like, oh, this is so annoying. Like, I just, I'm not in the mood for this, blah, blah, blah. And they just want this from me. No, it's up to you. It is up to you to shift yourself into the state that is ready for intimacy. That's not fair on you. And it's not fair on you to expect your body, to you're essentially crossing your own boundaries. Your body's saying, no, we're not here. Like we've got other stuff going on, and you're crossing your own boundaries by trying to force your body to do something that it doesn't want to do, that it's not ready for. That's not fair on any level to yourself. That's not building trust with yourself. And trust is another huge key factor in you awakening and being able to connect to your deepest pleasure. You have to create this trust within your body, and your body is not going to trust you if your body's sitting here screaming, going, no, we are barely surviving. We are in survival mode right now, and you're trying to force us into pleasure. And also, it's not fair on your partner. It's not fair on your partner if you're essentially lying to them. You're going into intimacy when your body's not ready for it. And, you're bringing that energy into your time with them, the deepest connection that two human beings can have. You're bringing that tenseness, that unease, you're bringing that in there with your partner, and again, potentially building resentment towards them. That's not fair. But it's first and foremost not fair on yourself to expect that. So if you are wanting to be intimate, and you want to be intimate, but your body's just not there, that, it's been a really stressful day and stuff's gone on, get yourself into the pleasure-ready state first. Go and do something that regulates your nervous system. Do some breath work. Breathe. You will be so surprised at the power of your breath. Just taking some long, slow, deep, intentional breaths into your body is a super powerful way to start immediately grounding you, bringing you out of your head and bringing you into your body. Then connect to your heart. Breathe into your heart space. Allow your heart to open. Give it time. Don't force it. And perhaps there's some grief or stress or anger that wants to arise. That needs to arise first. You need to allow that to come to the surface so it can transmute and can move, and then you'll be able to feel your pleasure freely. Give your body time. Give your body space, to be open to receiving pleasure, because that's what you want, isn't it? You want to receive, you want to feel this incredible, bliss and deeply profound orgasmic intimacy. You want to feel that. That's why you're sitting here listening or watching this episode. Thank you, by the way. But that's what you want. You're not here for forced pleasure anymore. You're not here for adrenaline-based pleasure. You're here for more. And in order to experience more, you've got to start getting yourself into that state rather than bypassing every red flag that your body is trying to signal to you and trying to force things to happen. Regulating your nervous system is something that is so underrated and, barely spoken about when it comes to pleasure. Yet it is so intrinsically intertwined with your greatest pleasure, with those levels of intimacy you want to experience. Regulating your nervous system, which can be done through self-pleasure, should be your first, priority. And last week, if I had have gone into my self-pleasure practice, as I normally do, but last week I didn't, as I normally do, going into it going, I just am going to be with whatever is arising here, I would have connected to that pain that was in my heart, that grief that I was, experiencing in those moments. I would have connected to that and allowed that to be felt and moved and transmuted. But instead I went into it going, no, I just want to feel the deep orgasmic bliss that I feel. Of course I'm not going to feel that deep orgasmic bliss. My body was not ready and not open for it. My body was like, you're ignoring us. You're ignoring what's really going on here. There's no way. We're not giving you what you think that you want here. And this is why, so many times, majority of my self-pleasure practices often, begin with some kind of emotion coming up. And majority of those that do, when sadness comes up, frustration, I'm going in, I'm punching the pillows, punching the bed, or I'm crying and screaming into the pillow, majority of those sessions will end up in the most profound orgasmic bliss where I am sitting there, laying there, crying, sobbing because of how incredible it feels. There's no coincidence there. It's because I first address what's going on and I regulate my nervous system by being with that energy that is arising. I connect to my body. I drop out of my head from the pain of the day or the week. I become present. I allow my body to relax. I connect to my heart, the pain that's on my heart, and that pain shifts and moves on its own. But those times when I go into self-pleasure and I connect to whatever is alive for me in that moment, I then shift into that pleasure-ready state naturally, not by forcing myself, naturally, and I end up nearly all the time that I do that experiencing, like, I can't even, it's so hard to even explain. And, I want you to know that I'm not saying this because I'm bragging. I'm saying this because this is what's available to you too. This sobbing at, oh my God, like, and often I'll be in those moments going, I just, wish that everyone could feel this. And you can, it's just a matter of will you do the work of the inner work, the body work, the somatic work to connect to it. I was a woman who was so freaking disconnected from my body and had ran my whole life and was numb and didn't feel pleasure, struggled with libido. And I just thought that's how it was, that I was one of the unlucky ones, quote unquote. I thought that's just how it was. So for me to go from that to, oh my God, this is just so incredible. Yes, I want to scream it from the rooftops because I want you to know that that is available to you too. You have the exact same capacity as me, but you've got to stop forcing yourself to try to feel this when your body is not ready. Your body is not open. Your heart is not open. You are stuck in your head. You've got to stop trying to force yourself to get there. The only way that you are going to get there, which I don't even like that, but quote unquote get there, is to become the version of you who comes back to herself, the version of you who prioritizes connection over orgasm. When you prioritize orgasm and put orgasm on a pedestal, it's always going to be up there on that pedestal. You're never going to experience it. Orgasm comes from a deep, profound connection with yourself and when you're with your lover. It comes from being open and ready to receive and surrendering to the moment and fully present. It doesn't come from force. It doesn't come from any of that. And if that's what you want to experience, which I know you do because you're sitting here listening and watching this, is you've got to become that version of you who prioritizes the connection and stops trying to force something when your body is not ready for it. You've got to be okay with if pleasure is not on the cards today, pleasure is not on the cards today. You've got to be okay with being with what's alive in your body in that moment. And that is how you transmute it. That is how you shift from survival mode, survival state to pleasure ready. And when you are pleasure ready is exactly how you open yourself to the most profound orgasmic bliss. Pleasure ready means your greatest pleasure. Survival mode and trying to force pleasure is not your greatest pleasure and is not what you are here for. So next time you're thinking, okay, I want to be intimate with my lover or with myself, just stop for a moment and just check in. Just check in. Am I pleasure ready or am I in survival mode? Little checklists like, do I feel connected to my body or am I stuck in my head? Does my body feel relaxed? How's my breath? Is my breathing shallow? Or is it slow and calm? Check in with yourself before you begin any kind of intimacy. And if you're not in that pleasure ready state, make that your priority, the nervous system regulation, the connecting to your heart, and watch how this, begins to transform your intimacy and pleasure. I hope that this helps you. I hope this has been another powerful episode for you, awakening your deepest pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I appreciate you, and I will see you next time with the next episode of Erotically Empowered.